Okay, so we said a minute ago that inflation is caused by or sustained by this wage price spiral. So if we're going to get rid of it, then we need to break this wage price spiral. And there are three basic ways that governments have tried this in history, and you'll come across them during the course. The first way is we said that restaurants are increasing their prices often because there are high levels of demand. So you see this at the end of the 1980s during what was called the Lawson boom. So what you need to do is that governments need to decrease the level of beer. In other words, they need to decrease the level of total demand in the economy. If there's less demand in the economy, then businesses are going to find it much harder to increase their prices. So going back to our restaurant economy, if you no longer have orders, queues of customers waiting outside, people phoning up, booking for Christmas, if your restaurant is half empty, then at that stage you're now not going to put your prices up. Therefore, across the economy, inflation will fall. So how can governments do that? They have two main sets of policy that I'll explain separately. All those, you can link to a video. There'll be videos on these elsewhere. They can use what's called fiscal policy. Fiscal policy just involves the use of tax and government spending. So how do we reduce the level of demand in the economy? Well, the government can increase taxes, or it can cut its own spending. So if the government is awarding fewer contracts to firms to build to build roads and infrastructure and so on, then that'll mean there are fewer jobs in the economy, and therefore there's less demand. On the other hand, the government can use monetary policy, and for a lot of the period that you're going to study in history, the government actually has complete control over monetary policy. That changes in 1997, but for most of the time, the government can do what it wants. Monetary policy, for your purposes, essentially is setting the level of interest rates in the economy. And interest rates are just the cost of borrowing. So if you make it more expensive to buy things, so buy sofas, and so a lot of people buy things like sofas and cars on credit, or they use credit cards. Interest rates are the cost of borrowing. So if you put interest rates up, people are less likely to want to borrow, and therefore all of those things are going to reduce the level of demand in the economy. A second thing you can try and do, is you can work on what's sometimes called the supply side. So what we can try and do is to make it harder for workers to get pay increases. So some of the things that have been tried are to decrease the power of trades unions. Trades unions negotiate for wages collectively. If you make trades unions less powerful, it's harder for them to get pay rises. Or you can decrease worker rights. I'm not saying any of these are a good thing, but if workers, you make it easier to fire workers, they're less likely to ask for a pay rise. That's going to tend to reduce inflation. Or you can try to, engage in free trade, because, what that does is it means there's more competition for firms, and therefore they're going to find it hard to increase prices. So again, if you make it, you can break, so demand reduces the ability of firms to increase prices there. Supply side policies are trying to break it by making it harder for wages to increase, and also sometimes target prices directly. And one thing that's been tried by governments that never works is direct controls. So a third set of policies is direct controls of wages and prices. And control of wages, these are called incomes policies. And basically, the government passes a law that says nobody can have a pay rise. Because nobody, I've lost my wage price spiral now, but because, so we said wages increase, costs increase, prices increase, so cost of living increases. If we introduce an incomes policy, no one can have a pay rise, then obviously costs don't increase and firms don't need to increase prices, which sounds very simple. But it doesn't work because it takes time for prices to stop increasing. And in that period then, your wage is fixed, but prices are still going up for a bit. You know that in real terms, you've lost out. So as soon as the government then says the policy is finished, you say, right, now I'll have a big pay rise then. And the whole thing starts all over again. And the other thing is that private sector firms, so obviously there's the government sector, which is called the public sector. Private sector firms, they want to be able to attract new workers. And if they can't offer them a pay rise, or to retain workers, to keep the ones they got, if they can't offer them a pay rise, then what they start doing is finding ways of getting around this by giving them good company pensions or company cars or more holidays and so on. And that increases the level of inequality between public and private sector workers. I mean, this has basically never worked other than for a very, very short period of time, which is why I don't know that much about it. But you'll study it in history. I think they try. I think Wilson tries it in the 60s, and I think Heath has some version of it in the early 70s. But essentially, they're always a failure because you're dealing with the symptoms, not the underlying causes. You're just sticking a sticking plaster over a gaping wound, but you're not actually tackling the wound itself. So the real solutions then are, in the short term, you try to reduce the level of demand. In the longer term, you make it harder for inflation to get started by using supply-side policies.